Welcome to Corpse Club. This is one of your co-hosts, Bryan Christopher. We today are continuing our Phantasm Retrospective, talking about Phantasm III, Lord of the Dead. And to do that with me, as always, on this great journey is friend and fellow fanatic, Scott Drebit. How you doing, Scott?
I am doing fine, Bryan. Yourself?
I'm not sure.
It's hard to work that PH into like every word. I try, but it's hard.
I think we just need to tell everybody to assume every time they hear an F sound, we're actually doing it in a PH throughout this entire retrospective.
Yeah, thank you, because I'm gonna break my tongue or something.
Well, you're in luck. We will have we had a guest during our last episode, and tonight we decided to bring in another really awesome guest. I'm very excited to introduce. She's got bylines right here at Daily Dead: Bloody Disgusting, Grim Journal, Talk Film Society, and Fangoria. And of course, she's a co-host of the Great Dead Ringers podcast. Welcome to Emily von Seele. How you doing, Emily?
Hey, gentlemen. I'm great. How are you guys?
Wow.
Excited now that you're here.
Fancy pants. Jeez. Talk about a resume, hey? That is this joint is getting classed up, Bryan, whether we want it or not, I think.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm sure
too kind.
We'll pull it in the other direction. We always do.
Oh, we always try to drown the baby, but it always keeps popping up somewhere. So
I expect nothing less. So you guys better deliver.
So yeah, I'm excited to have Emily on. I love Dead Ringers, and I love the folks on there, and I love that for me they're kind of like a spiritual sister podcast for us, because I go over and annoy them from time to time, including that like 3.5-hour marathon Mortal Kombat episode that we did that took as long as like 2 full run times of the movie, but I think we had fun with it. I hope people enjoyed listening to it. Emily is over here on Corpse Club all the time, usually talking it up with Heather. And if the birdie in my ear is correct, I believe Scott might be heard on an upcoming episode.
Yes, I'm going back again for the first time to record it for a second time. We had such a great time recording it. We thought we should do that again, and this time we'll have sound audio that will represent those minutes that we spent together. Because this time that we did it, I think it was just like a practice run,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we do that. We like to make sure that we get everything, just perfect. So we try to get all of our screw ups out of the way in a first run. And then the second run, it's like it's opening night and it's just not for reals.
I am so ready to hit the stage with Dead Ringers again for the first time.
There is but one thing that gives me heartburn about Dead Ringers versus Corpse Club, and is that we have very, very similar sign-offs. Here at Corpse Club, we say stay scary. At Dead Ringers, they say stay spooky. And because I listen to them every time I host an episode where I'm kind of leading the charge on Corpse Club, one day you are going to hear me say stay spooky and then curse a bunch, because I'm going to mess that up one day. And
that's the day that we tell Bryan that he's been made, and we take him over to Johnny's house, and he opens the rec room and he says, "What the?" And then we roll him up in a carpet and he sleeps with the fishes.
Okay.
You want to be a dead ringer? You'll be a dead ringer. Here's your dead ringer.
Still better.
That's fine. You can come join our team anytime you want.
I hope the gabagool is good over there.
Still better than your Pacino impression. Okay, so last time on Phantasm.
When did I do a Pacino?
It goes back to our 12-minute Satanic Panic episode where you were doing a little devil's advocate, and I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. It sounded like the vocal version of, like they say in Seinfeld, the full body dry heave. It kind of sounded like that.
Right, that's about the loins, right? Okay, let's go to Phantasm. Yeah, let's move on. Phantasm III, Lord of the Dead.
For Emily's sake, for everybody's sake, let us move on.
Yes.
So yes, last time on Phantasm. After young Mike Pearson takes a dimension-hopping monster called the Tall Man in a surreal battle of wills, we find out not really, because it was kind of all a way for Mike to cope with his brother Jody's death. But then we find out not really again, as Mike and Reggie have to go on the road to find the Tall Man, eventually landing in Perigord, Oregon, where they meet up with Liz, a young girl with a psychic connection to Mike, as well as Alchemy, another woman who is totally not actually the Tall Man. After a series of 80s action-style battles, the group finally does away with the Mammoth Undertaker after injecting him with acid-laced embalming fluid. Except not really, because Alchemy was totally the Tall Man the whole time, and Reggie is beaten to a pulp, leaving Mike and Liz racing into the darkness to parts unknown. So that's where we stand as we get into Phantasm 3. And I think before we kind of dig into some of the background and some of the meat, I always like to find out where, Emily, was your kind of first entry into the Phantasm series. Was it 3 or was it another installment?
So, my first entry to the series was actually kind of the series itself. When they announced that the 5th installment, Ravager, had secretly been shot and was ready to go, everyone got excited, and I realized I'd never actually sat down to watch the Phantasm series. So I decided to remedy that, and I watched them all over the course of like a week. And I thought they were fine. I liked them, but I wasn't fully in love, but I was glad that I'd seen everything. And, I just kind of, put it behind me and moved on to other stuff. But then a few years ago, Joe Bob Briggs did the whole series -2 because of weird licensing rights. But he did it all on his Christmas episode of The Last Drive-In on Shudder. And watching them again, that's when I fell in love with the whole series. I loved the characters. I loved the Tall Man as a villain. And I loved this strange little world that we were in where, everything seems pretty cut and dry until it isn't. And then we move on to the next film and everything changes.
That's amazing. So you saw your introduction to Phantasm was seeing all of them in order. And did that include Ravager the first time or just the first 4?
I think just the first 4, and then Ravager came out a couple weeks later. Gotcha. So I watched it on its own.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's... there's always that thing about Phantasm. I think there's something of an acquired taste about it. You need to, your brain needs to be in the right frequency. And then once you do kind of hit that wavelength, like Scott and I, and apparently like you, you're kind of hooked for life. It's always one of those things where it's hard to describe to someone who sees it as something that's very silly, because it's also on paper, I think, something that is very silly. It's Christmas balls flying around with spikes coming out of them that drain people's blood, running around with great value Jawas chasing after you. If you're just looking at this on a very kind of superficial and fundamental level, then it is going to be something that's just kind of goofy, low budget schlock. But yeah, if you just happen to hit that right frequency, I think it's something that's just so special.
Agreed. Yeah, there's something about it where once it gets its hooks in, you're a fan for life. There's something so special about, I think, just about the nature of the series as a whole, where, it wasn't thought up to be a multi-film series. It just kind of happened that way. And then they decided, oh, you want to make another one? Sure. And then 7 years later, hey, you know what? Maybe it's time to make another one. Yeah, why not? And you just kind of fall in love with these characters and you want to continuously go back and hang out with them.
I think what I find one of the most interesting things is that all 3 of us, I do believe, have come at the series from different vantage points. Myself being of a certain vintage, I've been fortunate enough to see them as they've been released. Well, really not fortunate, because then we have Emily, who, you know, gets to marathon them, which is also a very fun thing to do. And I'm sure we've all done that regardless of where we come. And then Bryan's come from a different angle, yet we all still love the same things about it. And I think that really speaks to the power of it, you know?
100%.
Absolutely.
And 3 for me was kind of the first one that I think I remember actively going into on my own and seeing it on the wall at the video store, and having remembered part 2. I think at that point I didn't remember a whole lot about part 1. But it was because I liked 2 as a kid so much. I definitely wanted to give this a try. So this was kind of, I remember Phantasm III just being that first one where, I guess this would have been 94, so I'm probably like 10 or 11 years old. This is where I'm really starting to kind of make my first like independent choices in terms of what horror movies I want to watch. And so Phantasm III was one of those for me. And yeah, I remember just being enthralled right away by it. And it was, I think, the movie that then made me swing back around to watch the first one in earnest, because there is that scene in the middle of it, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but when Reggie kind of has to mirror the scene from the first one where he puts his hands on the gate to kind of, you know, shut off the frequency, and they flash back just very quick to that shot of him doing it in the first one. And I remember being a little bit confused by it because I was so entrenched in 2 that, like, seeing him even younger than that kind of really threw me off. So yeah, this was kind of my, I think 3, like, I enjoyed 2 as a kid, but I think 3 was really, Emily, like you said, this was the one that got its hooks in me. So this is definitely a special one for me.
Yeah. And my perspective was, this is the one that for me was a course correction. By this point, I was already, you know, a rabid fan, and saw 2 in theaters, and then saw it many more times on video, and then following it in Fangoria and for its upcoming release. So when I knew when that was hitting video shelves, and I was there first day, luckily small town, no one else in this town would know what the hell Phantasm is, so I knew I would be safe with their one copy anyway, right? So I took that home, and I was blown away, because to me this captured the more of the anything goes spirit of the original, but in a sleeker package. You know, a little bit more money, of course, half as much money as Phantasm II, but, you know, 5 times as much money as Phantasm 1. Again, there's a lot of math going on here, and it, you know, it doesn't really matter in the end. But and not only that, but it was the reunion of the original cast. Not only did we get back A. Michael Baldwin as Mike, but we had Jodie come back too, which was a big surprise. And it brought back that family feeling without it feeling like nostalgia. Like it naturally felt like this was the next chapter. And like Coscarelli himself talking about the transition of James LaGrosse's footage to Baldwin's footage in the back of the hearse, and how he reestablishes in the Phantasm world Baldwin coming back by just a single shot of, instead of LaGrosse at the window, it's Baldwin at the window when Reggie is falling against it. And Coscarelli says that's all I needed was the one shot to reestablish that Mike was back in the role, and let's just move on. Like,
well, and it's funny because for me that was very seamless. The only thing that threw me off is then when you see him lying on the ground wearing the outfit that James LaGrosse was wearing in the last one, because like that's the only one where he's decked out in like ammo and guns and stuff like that. Like you never see the A. Michael Baldwin version of Mike like in commando mode. So seeing him lie on the ground like that is kind of like, it's off-putting a little bit, because like that's a very specific Mike. That's the Mike from 2. So seeing, you know, A. Michael Baldwin like that it threw me off a little bit.
Listen, it's Phantasm, right? Anything goes.
Anything goes.
Anything goes. Emily knows this well.
Yeah.
As well as this show, Emily, as wild as you, as far as you want to throw that silver sphere, you give her.
I love it. I think, you know, just on the same line as Anything Goes and establishing this group as a family, I also feel like bringing back Baldwin and Thornberry, it kind of established the actors as a family as well. Like, these are the people who make the Phantasm movies. It doesn't matter that, you know, they've aged significantly since we originally saw them. It doesn't matter that, you know, Jody's dead, but now he's like 10 or 15 years older. It doesn't matter, because they're just going to step into these characters again, and we're going to see where the story takes us, but we don't need it to make sense. It just is. Yeah,
it's almost like if you're the jerk at the Phantasm watch party going like, well, this doesn't make any logistical or logical sense, then you're the one that gets like booed and beer cans thrown at you, because like that is not what this series is at all.
Yeah, you have to go sit in the backyard for the rest of the screen because nobody wants to sit next to you.
You have to let the characters question what's going on. Okay, that's their job. Don't worry.
They're fine with it, we're fine with it too.
Yeah, but don't worry. That they ask a lot. What the hell's going on? Don't worry. They question things.
And so backing up just a little bit before we get too much into the meat of the movie, you know, I thought it'd be good to take a little bit of a look at the horror landscape. So we're talking about 1994, which, Scott, as we all know, is the zenith of horror genre output. Am I right?
I can smell the 90. I can smell that potpourri and soft focus Skinemax. Probably a high tower. Probably a masked killer, a woman in a robe. No, she's getting into a bubble bath. Yeah, so that's about 94.
I
Plus
mean,
this.
To be fair, there is some good stuff coming out in 94. Wes Craven's New Nightmare is 94. Interview with a Vampire, In the Mouth of Madness, Wolf. Wolf is funny because it's kind of part of that let's try and class up like Universal monster movies. So you've got like, let's put Jack Nicholson in Wolf. Let's put Robert De Niro in Frankenstein, which also came out that year.
I'm good without Wolf. I'm good.
And then, of course, you know, for all us goth or you know, would-be goth kids, The Crow also comes out that year. So, you know, superhero movie by way of horror aesthetic.
No, there's lots of good stuff. It's just interesting that Fangoria at that time, they would really have to scramble to what do you put on your cover, because so much of it, including Phantasm, but so much of it is like a mishmash of different influences, you know? Mm-hmm. Like The Crow has a little bit of horror, it has a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of sci-fi, a little bit of whatever, right? It's, well, do you put that on the cover? You know, it was an interesting time for horror. I know I crap on the 90s a lot, but there is a lot of good stuff out there. But like Phantasm itself, a lot of it was not theatrical.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's the other big thing is that, you know, we're really seeing a lot of VOD straight to video releases, VOD. Like we're in that era where it's almost like I can't even. I lived through straight to video and I've forgotten straight to video in the 20 plus years that since it's been a thing. But yeah, this was when straight to video is really hitting its stride in terms of amounts. So you're getting, you know, Leprechaun 2, I think that might have been straight to video. If not, it was a very limited release. But you're getting all of these, Puppet Master 5, Ghoulies 4, so many stuff that's going straight to video. And at this point, if you're going straight to video, that's like the death knell for people's expectations about how good this movie is going to be.
At the time, for sure.
Yeah.
Certainly not now. I was watching the special features on Phantasm III today, and Coscarelli himself said, at the time when we found out that it was going to go essentially going to be direct to video, he said his heart broke at first, right?
Yeah.
But then it just became normal for a lot of releases at that time to go that route, right? I mean, a lot.
Yeah. Well, Emily, what about you? What are your recollections of the late middle 90s, or however you want to say that? We're right on the precipice before Scream is going to be the second wave slasher boom. It's what a lot of people kind of consider the dark ages of horror. What are your memories of that era?
Oh geez. So my memories of that era are pretty small because my parents were pretty strict growing up, and I had to fight tooth and nail to be allowed to watch horror movies.
Gotcha.
And the only way I really succeeded was by watching them on TV, where all of the bad stuff was cut out. So I could make the argument, look, it's not very scary because it got approved for television. And my parents, they weren't okay with it, but at that point they would just kind of throw their hands up in the air and want the argument to be over.
They were picking their battles.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I was catching a lot of my stuff on TV late at night. Sometimes, I watched The Exorcist on TV, and it was so cut up, it didn't even make geographic sense half the time. Suddenly this character's on the other side of the room, and I don't know how they got there, but I was able to kind of put it all together. And then as I got into kind of the late 90s, I was able to start going to the video store and renting my own stuff. So for me, most of the horror that I was seeing was on video anyway, and I didn't really have a concept of what had gone straight to video versus what had hit the theaters already. It was just kind of the stuff that either I was aware of because of advertising or because the box art looked cool.
And I do think this is an era where a lot of us are watching our horror on VHS or on home video of some kind. That's kind of how we got to where we are with Phantasm 3 in the first place. It didn't do all that well in the box office, but it did get pretty good numbers for home video, cable, etc. So that's where kind of Universal comes in and says, we'll fund this thing, maybe do a couple test markets for it, but it's probably going to go straight to our home video. That being said, we're also going to put up, I think it was $2.5 million, which is only, 500,000 less than what they got for Phantasm 2. So,
well, and in retrospect, I have a hard time accepting the idea that the first Phantasm movie was a big theatrical release and did well because it's so weird. I can't imagine playing that to a regular audience. And just looking at this series, it just feels like the type of series that would have been released straight to video, not DVD, video, and then later DVD. And people would just kind of happen upon and develop a cult following from there. It just has that vibe to it for me.
Well, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like drive-ins were almost the closest thing you had to a direct-to-video outlet, because there were, when Phantasm's coming out in '78, there really is no home video or home release option. So if they're going to take a cheap distributor way out, it's probably going to be in a drive-in, right?
Yeah, but Phantasm ended up one of those movies that ended up having legs and stayed in theaters for much longer than they thought it was going. It just kept making money.
That is so cool.
And did incredibly well off of its budget. As for the drive-in, I know it played at our local theater. And I remember seeing a commercial for it on TV because it was going to be on the CBS late night movie, which I did not see at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I can say that when that first one came out, that there was definitely a buzz, and I was just like a 9-year-old kid when the first one came out. But it was the title, first of all, was one that caught your ear, and then if you saw the trailer, you went at 9 years old, you went, holy shit, I need to see that yesterday, even though I was terrified of it. But so, I mean, and then I finally saw it on video. But yeah, definitely drive-ins, strong presence in theaters. You know, it was kind of the movie that gave Avco Embassy its legs, you know, and Carpenter ended up doing his next 2 films with Avco. And so, you know, it was quite the good luck charm. By the time you get to 3, like I said, I was just already a seasoned fan who was really looking forward to it, and I really wasn't too concerned that it was going straight to video because it's Don Coscarelli, so I know there's going to be a certain level of, you know, expertise and attention brought forward. And then, and B, I thought, well, it's a Phantasm movie. That kind of stuff could work to its advantage maybe, but I didn't have to worry about anything because the final version that we do end up getting turns out to be as big as 2, or feels as big as 2, and as slick as 2, but just has enough of that weirdness, especially once we get to that mausoleum later on. Enough of that weirdness rubs off that you get that original vibe, and that for me is really what seals the deal on this one.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's an interesting case for me because, like, if you look at the IMDb synopsis, it's real simple. Mike and Reggie continue to hunt the mysterious tall man, discovering along the way that the invasion has already begun. And one of the things I noticed during this one is, like, a lot happens, but a lot doesn't really happen. Like, there's a lot of really good set pieces, a lot of really good sequences. They hint at a lot of stuff, but it's not like they break open the whole Phantasm mythos in this installment. But I think that works to its credit because it's, you know, the thing that winds up happening, especially as you get into like 3rd, 4th, 5th installments of a lot of movies or movie series, they wind up over explaining and you get your cult of thorns and whatnot, where here they give you just tiny kind of sousance of additional explanation, like the spheres are actually controlled by the brains of the people that they of the people whose graves they rob after they kill them, of course. So you get like a little bit more of the inner workings, but it's also still so much of a mystery in terms of like, what is the tall man's final objective? Like, yes, they're building an army, but to what end? So much stuff is still left up in the air that it just turns into something where it's like you just enjoy the ride on this one. Along for that ride, of course, we do have Michael Baldwin returning as Mike. We do have Bill Thornbury returning as Jody. I do think in terms of kind of that transition from 2 to 3, there are 2 people who kind of got short shrifts in terms of Don Coscarelli trying to cut ties with part 2. And it's James LeGros, you know, because I'm definitely glad Mike is back, or Michael Baldwin is back as Mike. But that being said, I thought James LeGros was perfectly serviceable in the movie that they were making with part 2. So I do feel bad that he was gone. But I think who even gets it worse is both the actress and the character who played Liz, because they basically said that, like, yeah, remember that whole kind of quasi-romantic thing we had going? I don't want to do that, so we're going to have one of these dwarves eat her face, and then we're going to decapitate her.
When you put it like that, I have to agree with you, but part of what I do kind of like about the series is that each each movie is made in service to a bigger plot, even though that bigger plot remains mysterious and vague. But when one movie ends and the next movie begins, we're resetting the game board. If there's stuff that we're not taking with us, we very, very quickly clip it and leave it behind and go about our merry way.
Yeah, I mean, at least she gets an explanation. Like, well, Scott, when we get to 4, we'll be talking about a character from 3 where it's like, what happened to this guy? Because they don't address it at all. But that'll be for part 4.
Yeah, but he's good again in Ravager, so it's all good. Yay!
Wait, okay, we might have to have a conversation in 5 because I think I might have missed if there's a character that's supposed to be in 5 that I wasn't recognizing as being. Well, so let's bring them up now. So let's talk about our new characters. We have 2. One of them I'm going to spend a very long time wanting to talk about. So we'll get the first one out of the way. We'll talk about young Tim, who is kind of a new stand-in for the young kid that Mike was in the original. But he's got some spiciness to him. We're introduced to him in this R-rated Home Alone-esque sequence where Reggie has been abducted by these trio of ne'er-do-wells who are gonna, they stuff him in the trunk of the Hemi. They're gonna do away with him, but they stop off at a house that is just filled to the brim with all kinds of deadly traps that are set by this what must be 10 or 11-year-old kid named Tim. What say you, Emily and or Scott, about our introduction to Tim and Tim as a character?
What do you say about Tim? So the first time I watched it and Tim showed up, I braced myself for the most annoying movie I was about to experience. I had no hopes for this character whatsoever because honestly, like, child acting in the 90s was not a great thing. It was not a great time. Kids weren't really trained. They were just kind of stuck on set. And if they could remember their lines, then they got to be in the movie more often than not. So I really wasn't expecting much from this character, but he delivered a lot more than I was planning to give him credit for. Like, he winds up being a legitimately believable character that does seem to have some of the world weariness that they were trying to build into him without selling it too hard and too on the nose. But of the 2 characters, I would leave him behind in a heartbeat in favor of the other.
Yeah, and no insult to Tim either, but yeah, because
my God, Jesus, that escalated quickly. Like, we're just talking about little Timmy here, and all of a sudden Emily's like leaving him at the side of the road for lurkers.
Well, Reggie tried to.
Right.
Tim's not that
I guess
bad.
Tim came back and earned his keep, so we can't, fully write him off.
I do like that they have another child in there for Reggie to kind of mentor, and I like that they get Reggie and Tim have that fireside scene that's reflects on the first one, and there's a couple little nice moments that kind of harken back to the first one, mixed with that introduction to Tim, which is like, an R-rated Home Alone, which I absolutely love that Coscarelli does, because why not? It kind of takes the piss out of Home Alone a little bit. I mean, if these things actually happen, you'd be making graves in your front yard too.
And I appreciate there's actually like a coldness to that sequence, like where the last guy is in that pit and Tim just kind of very casually pulls his gun and shoots him in the head.
You just hear the shot.
Yeah, like there's almost
look at the flowers.
There's actually a moment for me, I think I remember when I was a kid watching that, I'm like, so do we have to worry about Tim? Like, is he a threat? but I do appreciate, like you were saying, Emily, like he conveys that sense of like he had to grow up way too fast in this situation. And I think that, he conveys that in a way that is believable and doesn't come off as obnoxious.
No. And to be totally fair, I wouldn't say it comes off as glaringly brilliant either. I would say it comes off as
perfectly serviceable.
Perfectly serviceable, competent,
totally functional,
and not annoying. And you know what? Not annoying is the bar that they all have to jump over, and that's good enough for me.
So good on you to Kevin Connors for not being annoying, and just kind of, doing your job enough to really give the spotlight to the character that I am here to discuss for the next 2.5 hours. I'm
going to go make a sandwich.
Gloria Lynn Henry as Rocky. She is, for me...
Never heard of her.
Shut up. She is my MVP supporting character of this whole series. She is introduced like a lot of Phantasm characters, just kind of out of left field and out of nowhere. They're kind of, to use an RPG term, they're dungeon crawling one of the local mausoleums for, capital R reasons. Basically, they just want to be somewhere where they can set up this fun scene. And they just randomly kind of cross paths with Rocky and her traveling partner, I believe Tanisha. We don't get too close to Tanisha because I think within 30 seconds of her being on screen, she is the first victim of the movie to get the classic sphere drill to the head, because each one of these has to have at least one of those. And so, she's gone very quickly. But we're introduced to Rocky taking on one of these spheres with a pair of nunchucks. And then she actually is able to kind of parry it, but it breaks the nunchucks. She is literally ready to punch this sphere until, of course, Tim comes in with his gun and kind of takes care of it. But it's such a great introduction to Rocky, and she only gets better throughout the course of this movie. And from what I gather, Emily, you're definitely on Team Rocky, correct?
Team Rocky all the way. She is so badass.
I'd like to just take a second.
No.
Are you going to say something not nice?
No, I'm not at all. I'm going to say I think we should take a moment to recognize Tanisha and her part in the series, because really, if you think about it, if the Scream Queens TV series had decided to use the Phantasm series instead of Saw, the Tanisha part would have been like the showcase on Scream Queens and someone getting that part, because it is such a perfect kill.
Ooh, yeah.
The way it's shot, everything. I absolutely, it's not as good as a kill that comes later on, but it's, again, and it's a kill that harkens back to the original movie with the caretaker in the hallway, and this is the scene that Coscarelli went with to the MPA to appeal the decision of NC-17, because he said that there's more blood spilled in the caretaker version than there is in the Tanisha version, but he lost.
And the caretaker pees his pants, so there's that too. So
right, yeah. I hope that he mentioned that, because anytime you have pee happening, that's like an automatic additional MPAA star or strike. I'm not sure if they're looking at it as good or bad, but it's something.
But they got an R for Phantasm.
Yeah.
There's no, Tanisha didn't pee herself.
Yeah.
Maybe she did. I don't know. I'm not judging. I would probably pee myself too.
I would just at the sight of the ball.
Right.
So there's less going on. They should have got an R. But anyway, I just wanted to, before we move on, to stop and pay a little quick tribute to Tanisha. Thank you for your service in the Phantasm universe.
I do think there is something to that, too, Scott, because, in addition to using that as kind of like the argument with the MPAA, that is also another statement of like, okay, we're going back to basics. We're not going to do, we get a little of that towards the end where the tall man's kind of golden sphere makes a return appearance, but, we're not trying to, they've gone back to the sphere it's an important part, but it's not really the star of the show like it was in 2, where they're saying like, what's all these wacky gadgets that can come out and kill people in gnarly ways. This is like, no, we're going back to these things protrude spikes, drill into your head, and drain it out of your brain until you're dead. And so I think with that is also a return to leaning into kind of the surreal visuals of the movie. And a lot of the set pieces were also really interesting. Like some of those scenes where the tall man is in, I guess, his lair or something like that, and he's in like that very elaborate kind of funeral home room that's got a bunch of candles on the wall, and it's just a very striking image. And there's a lot of that kind of surreal imagery. So I think they're returning to basics and kind of going back into the imagery rather than just kind of seeing how much they can ramp up the gore.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know. I think that by this time in any given series, you're either going to be seeing how much you can up the ante with any given next installment, or you're going to be saying, okay, how can I make this feel like the movie that people fell in love with? Like, what can I do to make this richer and more interesting? And sometimes it doesn't always come down to, trying to one up yourself in terms of effects. Sometimes it does, but I think that being able to see, what's what and really understand the feeling of the film, in addition to the crazy visuals and the gore gags, I think it's an important line to be able to toe, and I think it's one that Coscarelli really understands.
And not to say that like they definitely didn't skimp on the gore gags. Like Mark Shostrom is back. He was supervising things on part 2. So he's back as the supervisor for this one. And it's another one of those instances where for me, like, this might have been a straight to video movie, but it did not look like one. Like the effects and the gore gags were very, very well done. Like none of them were distracting. The House of Horror, like the R-rated Home Alone, you get a hatchet to the head. You get that kind of mini classic frisbee across the throat. One of the top 2, I think, frisbee related kills that are in the genre. And then all the really fun kind of goopy stuff that happens to that trio after they become zombies. So you got the one getting his head screwed off by the ball later in the movie. You got the ball going clean through the blonde woman's head. The one thing I thought was really funny about that one is that when it goes through, if you look, like it's just solid. Like there's no like, you're not seeing like a cross cut of like brain or like inside of the head. It's just like this gray solid all the way through.
Well, that's what happens once you turn into a zombie and then you're dispatched later.
Yeah, it's all just kind of
it makes sense.
Goop. Yeah, right? It tracks for me.
Solid gray goop. No, it doesn't. I think maybe what well, I'm sure there would be a lot of people that wouldn't know, but straight to video or direct to video at that time was like leprosy in the movie business. Mm-hmm. If they previewed your movie and they came up and told you it was going straight to video, that's bad news. You need to sit down with your agent and maybe come up with a new strategy if that starts to happen. But that's kind of the reputation that it had at the time. So it already going into it, I certainly had that in my mind. I was like, is it going to feel like a movie? I guess was the silliness that was playing in my head. And again, like I'd said before, there was, no reason to worry whatsoever. This is a movie that could proudly, be displayed and on the big screen. And I would love to see this on the big screen someday.
Definitely.
Yes.
Definitely. There are very few seams in this one. I would argue that there are a few more in 4 and a lot more in 5, as much as I love it. But in this one, I don't get, because we talk about how Universal was saying, it's going to go direct to video, but that's never been Coscarelli's. Like, he didn't take that approach and say like, oh well, who cares? He still treated this, regardless of if he actually thought it was going to go to a theatrical release or not. He's clearly trying to make a theatrically cinematic movie, and that comes through very much so. Mm-hmm. Now that said, we have gotten completely off track because we started talking about Rocky, and then Scott, I think, deliberately tripped us up and had us go off on a tangent, because I think he secretly he doesn't like Rocky. I think.
Oh no, I love Rocky. As a matter of fact, I was watching the special features, and they showed an updated interview with her from whenever the Wells Fargo set was put together, and oh no, she looks stunning. She looks better than ever.
And I think what I appreciate the most about her is that she is the perfect foil for Reggie, because this is kind of the movie where we start going down that path in 2, but this is the one where you really start getting Reggie the pushy horn dog. And she is having none of it, which is great, because it's as much as I love Reggie, and as much as I love kind of his smooth ice cream man thing, like the constantly trying to get people into the sack within like 5 minutes of meeting them, gets a little bit old for me, which I know is kind of sacrilege, because for a lot of people that's part of his charm. But it is something that I think especially in this one, because he's being real pushy in that hotel scene, to the point where like Rocky has to literally handcuff him to the bed to get him to cut the shit. So for me, it's bothersome that he kind of takes it to that spot, but it's also kind of glorious to see Rocky's response to it.
Yeah, she handles herself so well and manages. I like that she's able to both, rebuff him and also turn it into a comedic moment, as well as she does.
Yeah, I think he would have ended up in the cuffs anyway. Just because he just wouldn't shut up, so but I think the only reason it works, I think the main reason that it works is because there is great chemistry between the two of them, between Rocky and Reggie, great comedic energy. And they play off each other. They play off of it just beautifully, I think.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And it's, Emily, kind of like you're saying, they find a good balance between, there's kind of an antagonistic relationship between them. But as things move along, there's a begrudging affection. Of course, Reggie is kind of smitten from the beginning, but by the end of it, like Rocky, I think like Reggie to her is kind of like that annoying dog that won't stop following you around, but you kind of can't help but love it anyway. I think that's kind of what Reggie is to Rocky. And that kind of comes through, and you got to love that moment where he's getting attacked by the one zombie woman, and she's just kind of like hacking away at his back, and she's just like jumped on top of him, and Rocky's kind of like get away from my man, and not in like a my man kind of way, but like he's with me, like leave him alone. And I love those kind of moments, and it never turns into anything that is like unbelievable in terms of their relationship arc. The only part that it does that is in Reggie's dream sequence, and of course it's because it's Reggie's dream sequence. But beyond that, they let Rocky be a character kind of unto herself. And of course, one of the few people in the Phantasm series who kind of gets to ride off into the sunset.
Yeah, that's not something that we see often. But again, that's all in retrospect, right? Mm-hmm. It's funny to see her pop up in Ravature and quite delightful. For what reason? I couldn't tell you. Maybe no one could, but it's cool to see them there. And that's kind of, what I think that's kind of like part of my motto when it comes to Phantasm is I don't know what they're doing here, but I'm so glad that they're here and that they're doing it.
Yes.
Because it's only this group of people that can produce this specific result. And it's just that whole family vibe that you get from the actors, inclusive of Tim and Rocky, is another, I think, as we rewatch all these movies and go through them again, I think it's another big part of why they're so dear to us is that sense of family that you get not only in front of the camera but behind as well. It's like these movies are their life's journey as well, and you don't get a lot of series that can do that.
Agreed. And it's also important that this could have gone down a bad road in terms of a white guy writing and directing for a black character. But I remember reading in Dustin McNeil's, Phantasm Exhumed, he has some interviews with Gloria Lynn Henry, and she said that Coscarelli was very open to Henry kind of adjusting her character, and if there were lines she's like, I would never in my life say that as a black woman. He was, I think he was very aware of where he was writing from and allowing for the fact that he's probably not going to be super authentic in that. From the sound of things, Gloria Lynn Henry had a lot of input about kind of how the final version of Rocky that wound up on screen.
Oh yeah, really cool. He flat out told her. He said to her, he says, I don't know if you can tell, but I haven't written for a lot of young black women. So please help me. If none of it is ringing true, change it to something you want that's going to fit better. And who couldn't want more than that in a director?
Indeed.
It's like it's not so precious. It's like, well, let's make the best movie we can, no matter what's necessarily down on the page, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then just, being able to recognize where your strengths as a director and as a writer are and aren't, and being able to kind of submit to the person who does understand that aspect better.
And I think the other interesting thing about Rocky is kind of bringing her back to her relationship and how she fits into, obviously, the trajectory of our main characters. And I think 3 is an interesting installment in that it kind of really represents the shift from it being Mike's story to Reggie's story. Like you see in 2, there's a little bit more of a, I think, kind of splitting up where it kind of becomes that buddy road movie. But here's where you start to see they start to get separated. And for the most part, during that separation, they'll go back to Mike. But I think we're mainly following Reggie and kind of his continued road trip to find him. So seeing that pivot to following Reggie, I think it works partially because I think it works here, but I think it works even better in hindsight after seeing where the franchise ends up in Ravager, because of the way they kind of have a beautiful way of bringing those arcs back together. And I don't want to get too far kind of down the rabbit hole on that, but I just think it's interesting that shift starts here.
Agreed.
And so I'm trying to see what else we have here in terms of some story. The only other thing that I definitely want to talk about, because it's something that I only really noticed just kind of how drastic it was after reading about it before watching it during the last viewing I did last night before we recorded today. If you read any interviews about the hearse flip stunt, so there's, again, in a bit of a callback to the first one, there's a chase sequence where you've got a hearse chasing after the boys in the Hemi, or in this case, the boys and girls in the Hemi. And in this case, it's being driven by the three zombified hoodlums from earlier in the movie. They're in this very bright pink hearse, and it ends up with them kind of spinning off of a boulder, tumbling in the air and landing. So if you read about the stunt driver for this, guy named Bob Ivy, was apparently just so tickled to be able to be part of this. He was a big Phantasm fan. He remembered, he saw the first two, loved the first two, loved the idea of being able to contribute to the third one. And apparently he just kind of, he got a little overzealous, I think is one way of putting it, because as he was talking to Coscarelli about kind of his plans of going off the mechanism that would, make him kind of ramp off and do at least one flip, the miles per hour he planned on doing kept going up. So, he said at first, I think I can get this thing up to 50, or, a week beforehand is like, I'm going to push for 60. And then apparently right when they're lining up the shot, he's getting ready to call action. And, but Bob kind of looks at him and goes, you know what? I'm going to do 70. And so Coscarelli is like, don't kill yourself to make Phantasm 3. But apparently Ivy was hearing none of it. And he hit it doing close to, he had to have been doing close to 70, because when you see him ramp off in this movie, like I'm watching it going, someone literally has to have died to make this scene if there's someone behind that wheel, because it goes a solid 30 feet in the air, does about 3 or 4 rolls before it lands, and then just keeps on going. And I think at the time there's some rumor or kind of some speculation that it was the longest, it's called like a pipe ramp or something like that, pipe ramp jump to date. And I think it was almost accidental. I don't think anybody was planning for that thing to go as far as it did.
Oh my God, I'm so glad he's not dead.
Well, no, not from that. And he shows up in 4. He's the demonic cop.
Oh, okay.
In
really?
4.
But he's not wearing any makeup.
Okay.
It was the hearse stunt. Actually, that's what he looks like after the hearse stunt.
Like, this is just me now.
Apparently, it did. Like, it knocked him unconscious. Like, they had to kind of bring him around. But I'm picturing one of those things where it's like, he kind of sits there in a daze and then just kind of like raises his hand and everybody like cheers, or they're like, oh, thank God we're not going to get sued or have like a wrongful death situation.
A little bit of both.
But how awesome in the 90s to see rock rolls. Growing up in the 70s, it was on every TV show. Literally, like you'd hit a pebble and the car would flip over. So to see this in the 90s, that someone was still not only doing it, but was saying, you know what, since no one's watching anyway, let's do like the biggest rock roll jump ever. Okay.
Why not?
And he does it. And he does it. Why not?
But yes, next time you are watching Phantasm 3, keep an eye out in that scene and just take a minute to truly acknowledge the fact that like someone was able to walk away from that, because in all reality, they probably shouldn't have. Like he should not have lived to be able to be the zombie cop in part 4, because that was a death-defying jump that he made in that car.
You want to talk family, Toretto? Talk the Phantasm family.
Oh, you're the worst. Okay. So how'd we do in terms of box office? Well, box office is a very relative word for Phantasm 3. Universal wound up giving it like a 2-week theatrical run in May of 94 in 2 test markets, Baton Rouge and St. Louis. For what it's worth, it was the highest grossing Phantasm movie in those markets. But just the same, Universal decided to primarily go straight to video, which it did in October of 94. I have no idea what the numbers were. I don't know to what degree they even track like home video numbers. But if my interest in it is any indication, then I think it probably did pretty well, because I saw it on the video rack, and I couldn't pluck that thing off fast enough. So, but yeah, alas, this is definitely going to be the last time we see anything approaching even a consideration for a theatrical run for the Phantasm movies. And I feel like it's also probably one of the first ones where it's really not in the mainstream critic consciousness. With the first 2, you're seeing reviews from Roger Ebert and other folks, and whether or not they're good is something to be argued. But like if you look at Wikipedia in terms of the or at Rotten Tomatoes, the people who you're seeing doing the reviews for it are pretty much people who are already interested in horror. So you got like Scott Weinberg talking about it lacks the punch of the original, but it's still fun. You've got Steve Barton of Dread Central. The film's humor is hit or miss, but I think kind of the main takeaway is that at this point, if you're watching this, you're probably a pretty diehard Phantasm fan if you're actively seeking this out.
Well, if you get through. Yeah, if it takes you 3 movies to decide if you're on board or not, you've spent like 4 hours of your life and you're not sure if you're going to proceed. Maybe you have, bigger issues in terms of organizing your time better. But it's and that's part of the problem at the time. So it goes to video and it goes on the shelf and it makes the pages of Fangoria, and I rent it and I love it and I can do my word of mouth thing, and then that's it, right? We're still at this point pre-internet age. It's not until we get to Oblivion that the online Phantasm community can kind of start to thrive and grow. So again, this was kind of an outlier, right? It came out and 6 years after the original, and we know how short the attention span is of film goers. Not horror, of course, but again, 6 years later, they're just appealing to the franchise fans at this point. But you know what? I think that was something that we didn't need to worry about, because it's not like Coscarelli is going to make just a fan service film. He also wants to make a good film and further this creation that he made.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So Emily, where does part 3 sit in kind of the pantheon of the Phantasm movies?
Okay, I've been thinking about this for 2 days straight, and I'm really having a hard time coming up with a distinct rating. Because I suck at ratings. I could be here all day. But I really like it for a lot of reasons. It's really fun. It's got great character work. It does a good job, Bryan, like you said, of kind of pivoting the story to a different angle and starting its journey to focus on Reggie. I love seeing all of these characters and actors back together. But for me, I feel like Phantasm is really in its sweet spot when it is super mysterious and weird. And this one does that a little bit, but because it is primarily more of an action film, I think that makes it fall a little bit lower than some of the other ones for me. But I adore it at the same time. Like, I've never met a Phantasm movie that I didn't love. So I don't want to say like this is my second from the bottom, but it kind of is.
And that's relative.
But I don't think that that's necessarily a negative.
No,
I love them all.
We talked about it, I think, a little bit during the original one. Like, there's not a single one of these that I don't love. And like the point differential in terms of like, you know, if you're talking like a 1 to 10, the point differential between all of them is maybe 1.5. So it's, I totally get what you mean. Like, it can be the second, your second to least favorite installment, but that doesn't mean you don't still love it.
Right. I think the first one will, above and beyond, always be my favorite. But I think that part of what I love about this series is just watching the shifts that they take from film to film and them deciding, okay, what's this one going to be? How do we plug it in and still make it its own unique thing? And every film is a little bit different from the others in that regard. And that's kind of what makes it interesting.
Awesome.
Yeah, completely. And where your ranking for this may be second to last, mine may be second to first, and we're espousing the same love for the exact same movie.
Yeah.
That's what's special.
The series is so good.
I know. I think we do need it. We need a group cry, I think, over this.
Big hug.
Big hug. Bring it in.
So I think for me, what's interesting about 3 is that and I was thinking about this a lot during my last viewing, is that it reminds me a lot of Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, because I feel like it's that kind of return to basics and course correction, like you were talking about, Scott, from part 2. As much as we've come to love Halloween 3, I think, as a horror community, when they went to Halloween 4, they were kind of seeing part 3 as a mistake, and they wanted to get back to basics. And I think Coscarelli is doing something similar here. And he's going back to basics, not just in terms of like kind of pulling back on some of those over-the-top 80s action horror instincts, but also just kind of like just overall just trying to streamline things. Like, I think this is probably one of the easiest to follow installments of Phantasm, and that could be seen as for better or worse, because as we all know, we love the first one, and half of that doesn't make a lick of logical sense. So it's this is one that is it has a lot of that Phantasm flavor, but it's, I think, a little bit more digestible without being kind of too subservient to the times like part 2 was.
Yeah, digestible. I get that. I also think that by this point, it, coming around to part 3, that while not paying fan service to the point of it showing so much, I think that specific energy, yes, Coscarelli wanted to bring back from the original. I think what's exciting to see as well is that technically speaking, and that bigger budget that he had on 2, that when he got to 3, he could, for not far away from the budget of the original one made 15 years prior, he could, with evolving technology and that accrued talent that he got in between the years, create that same kind of vibe of the original, but it looks better. It looks of the time. And I think there's so many. Watching it again just today, I just kind of marveled at, this may be a direct-to-video movie, but it's clearly a movie made for the big screen. It has a lot of scope, and it has a lot of reach, and it has 16 million more questions than it does answers.
Yeah.
And that's, why I love it.
And I do say, it's more easily digestible, but it also doesn't offer any clear-cut resolution, which is an absolute staple of the Phantasm movies. So, it keeps to the spirit.
We know less. We know less than at the start of the movie, at the end, than we do. If you balanced out the resolutions we get versus new questions raised.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But they managed to drop enough new information and get our characters, enough to a new place that it still feels like not that we've done something, but that we've seen something new. We've been given something. So it doesn't feel like we've been cheated in that way.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like they're spinning their wheels or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
We
just kind of get like a new bread trail of clues and ideas from film to film, and maybe some of those get answered eventually. A lot of them don't, but it still goes a long way towards world building.
When Mike comes out of the bathroom near the end and his eyes are golden and his head is bleeding, I think I audibly gasped as I sat in my chair and watched it at home. I was like, oh, what the? And then it's like, no, he's gone with Jody. And then Reggie's pinned against the wall, and Tim pulled the short straw, and he gets pulled through glass this time.
glass that he was standing nowhere near. He's in the middle of a mausoleum. Where was that window?
It was, yeah, I really can't defend that one.
Oh boy.
I was going for a mise en scene, but no.
Just deflated.
Yeah.
So we know what we think about this. As always, I like to hear from fellow fans about this particular installment. So we put the word out on Twitter, and we got some good responses. So at Lando Horror, or at Lando_horror, just one fanatic talking here, but Lord of the Dead should get 2 episodes because Rocky is an episode by her damn self. Hear, hear.
Amen.
Actually wound up getting a little bit of a thread from Arnold T. Bloomberg at Doctor of the Dead. My favorite of the series, perfect balance of humor and horror, and best ending, peak Phantasm. So I dug a little deeper and asked, well, do you like this more than the original? And he responded, the only one of the series I ever really revisit over and over is the original. The atmosphere, the music, everything is superb. But I still say 3 is my favorite in terms of storytelling and character. I guess you could say I love both 1 and 3 for different reasons. And so they sit equally for me as highlights of the series. Which I think, Scott, that's kind of aligned with your perspective.
Yeah, that I can comfortably sit next to Arnold and share a sandwich and a bowl of soup and talk about this movie in peace and brotherhood. Definitely.
I don't know why, but I'm picturing you doing that while, like, I'm picturing that picture of the old workers on top of the beams, like on the skyscraper that they're building.
You would never see me anywhere near a skyscraper.
Is that where you go, Scott, to talk about movies? The top of the skyscraper that's half built?
I do. Yeah, I get great reception up there. It's a bit windy, though. I got to get a screen for my mic.
And then one of our friends from Down Under, Peter Hearn, at Hearn-esque. I love the energy of 3. When I wrote a retrospective on the series, it was my favorite, and I think it might still be. And it's interesting that we end on Peter, because I think we might be hearing more from him in a future installment.
Dun, dun, dun.
Foreshadowing.
All right.
Subtle, just the way we like it.
So now we get to probably the dumbest segment of this retrospective.
Probably.
We are going to return to Morningside Musings, where
yes, by popular demand.
Wildly inaccurate speculation about what the tall man is saying in his films, and they really started giving him some actual lines in this one. So I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do in terms of our line readings. I think Emily might even be on board to join us for a couple of these.
God, she better.
Yes.
So
you just got to go round robin.
I'll take the first one. I do need someone, because it's dialogue that doesn't make sense unless kind of you give Reggie's response. So I'm going to say the line, "I don't want him in pieces," and then Scott, I need you to say, "That's the only way you're going to get him," and then I'll reply.
Don't tell me how to read my line.
Oh no, get into the character. I'm just giving you the line. Don't. Your delivery is entirely up to you.
I can see the dialogue. Okay. Just save your reading for yours there, okay, pretty boy?
All right, well, sometimes the way these conversations go, I wasn't sure you could read, so I just wanted to make sure. All right, Here we go. Getting in character. I don't want him in pieces.
That's the only way you're going to get him.
Who were you even doing there?
That was Clint Eastwood as Reggie the ice cream man.
Yes, I can see that.
All right, I'm going to need to start over on that one. All right, hold on. I don't want him in pieces.
That's the only way you're going to get him.
Then I wait. Take good care of him. What was the second reading?
That was obviously Emily knows who it is, right?
Do I?
I mean, come on, that was James Mason.
Yes, it was.
So I don't even have the mental bandwidth after that. Let's just say it was the tall man was an acting coach reading lines with the worst actor of all time.
Oh, okay.
All right. So we only have one boy line reading for this movie, and I think we got to give that to Emily.
Can I do it? Can I do it?
Oh, please do it.
Of course.
Yay. Thank you. Okay. Big deep breath. Boy.
Wow, that was by far
best
the
one
best
of the series.
Boy we've ever done.
Like, in all fairness, we set a very low bar on that one.
Yeah.
But
mine sound constipated.
Mine, for whatever reason, I always get gun shy and clip it off at the end. Like, I don't go full throated the whole way through. So it's just like, I start saying it and then just kind of stop and run away. So
once you're like 3 or 4 O's into it, you start feeling really like vulnerable. So you really got to push on through. I totally get why you flip it off.
He doesn't have the fortitude, Emily.
In terms of interpretation, like, I just think at this point he's always so excited to see Mike that it's just an expression of joy, and it's the only way that he can really let that out.
It's like a reach out and touch someone. It's like that, right? Like a commercial.
Sure, why not?
You know, if there was enough money, there was enough real money in this imaginary world we have that we could transfer into the real world, I would do commercials for like phone companies, but I would use like the stuff we love, like Phantasm in commercials. And when mom and pop at home are watching the commercial and they go, "What the hell is this?" Who cares? We got a Phantasm commercial.
It's not
Shut
for
up.
you.
It's not for you. I know I blew all my money. I know we're losing shares by the minute. Doesn't matter. It's Phantasm.
It makes me happy.
That's right.
All right.
All right. Is it my
Yeah,
turn? Am I
you're up,
next?
sir.
All right.
Third
right.
one down.
Oh, I know which one we're at.
Just trying to help.
I mean, let's see if I can follow this stage direction. Bullet point boy, bullet point my line. Am I on the right track?
Yes, you've clearly been rehearsing.
Great.
Okay, good. All right. It's time now, boy.
Not bad.
Nicely
Not
done.
bad.
The boy wasn't bad. The It's Time Now had a little bit of a Irish lilt in it for some reason. I don't know why.
Emily, you got any thoughts on kind of what's just below the surface there?
The only thing I can land on is like, get your ass in the car. It's time to go.
Perfect. Yeah. No, it's Mike is always late for his after school activities pickup at the end of the day, and the tall man's just fed up. So 100% agree.
Right. Especially now that Mike is in his 20s. I mean, we should have solved this problem ages ago.
What the tall man does to Mike in this movie, I can't say things on the air that could incriminate me later on or make people think poorly of me. But I'm just saying I've wanted to do occasionally to my son what the tall man does to Mike in this movie. But
so if we ever find out, like,
natural.
If we see a picture of your son and he's got like half of his scalp peeled away, we know he pushed just a little too far
in there.
Yeah.
And there's a sphere in there. But hey, they're good kids. They're good kids. They're good. They're adults. That's the point I'm making. They're adults. I couldn't agree with your interpretation more. I love how the tall man in this movie has two speech modes. If you pulled the string at the back, if you just pull it the short way, you get your boy and it's time now, boy. If you pull it really hard, you get these speeches about the meat constructs and the earthly flesh. And, you know, it's like he doesn't have a conversation, and nor should he. He's the tall man. Like, who would have a conversation? But those are his two speech modes. Yeah.
Yeah, he's either going to do a couple of words or a couple of sentences.
Yeah.
All to himself.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're back around to me. You know the way out. Use your brain, boy.
That was good. That was pretty good. He rushed it as usual, but it was pretty good.
Well,
it's good.
It's the nerves.
Okay. You know the way out. Use your brain, boy. Okay, so what this is again, it did make the final cut, but in the 4.5 hour version of Lord of the Dead, there is a whole montage of a getting to know you scene between the tall man and Mike, set to raindrops keep falling on my head. And one of those days that they're together in the montage is them playing puzzles, and Mike's, you know, the spheres kind of sticking out a little bit. So tall man glues the piece back down and kind of gives a knowing smile at Mike and then says, use your brain, boy. And they both kind of have a little laugh about it. And
Aww.
It should have stayed in. I think it should have stayed in.
I like how you seem to kind of like exasperate yourself with that explanation about halfway through.
Oh, I exasperate myself all the time. I'm exhausting. If you listen, if you guys think I'm unbearable, imagine being me 24 hours a day.
Well,
it's a trip, man.
You carry it with a stoicism that, yeah, I think Emily's right. You love it.
Stoicism. As stoic as Jerry Lewis. All right.
All right. Well, he's got a lot of lines in this one.
next?
We're not even halfway through. I think we're Emily. I think you're up.
He does. This is other. Well, no, he gets even wordier in Oblivion. But yeah, up to this point, it was like, holy smokes.
Mm-hmm.
And that was again. Yeah, that was again another wonderful thing. It's like, he has such an amazing voice, and you know what a great actor he is. And it's like the Christopher Lee Dracula movies. It's like, my God, have him talk. He's Christopher Lee. Why is he mute? You know, I want to hear Angus Scrimm speak. It's a beautiful, horrifying thing to listen to. So, yeah, that was another big in the plus column when I first saw this was that added screen time for Angus and that added the added lines and the just everything about his performance in this one.
100%. So Emily, swing away.
Let's see. Okay, there we are. Down. Much better.
Man, she's so good at this. Like, she's putting us to shame. I've already got this one though. He's at the movies, and in front of him is a taller man who is a good 8 feet taller. But although he's taller, he's a lot more polite. So when he was asked to move, he very conscientiously kind of ducked down, actually moved a seat over, and to which the tall man responded, "Much better."
I like it. Yes.
That is the daddiest dad joke you've ever told. And that's me saying that, Bryan.
Yeah.
And he realizes the gravity of that situation.
I'd like to say I'm not proud of it, but I'm actually pretty proud of that.
You have to embrace it.
All right, you're up, Drebit.
Ooh, I got a mouthful, don't I? Okay. Welcome home, boy. You found yourself back to where you started. Your journey is now complete.
There was some Nicholson in there. In that second sentence.
Welcome home, boy.
Only for a second, though. Then it backed off.
Yeah.
You found yourself back to where you know into Bob Dylan. That's a quick morph into back where you started. Your journey is now complete.
Well, I think that's our interpretation. He's trying to write the next kind of Bob Dylan-esque Americana song.
Mm.
Yeah. All right. I'll buy it. It's better than much better.
Is Reggie going to supply the guitars and the tuning forks?
100%. That's why he's so obsessed with them. Like, this whole time, he's just wanted to start a jam band. And
I just want to jam, you guys.
And every time he comes around, like, he gets shot at with a 4-barreled shotgun.
That's rough. That's real rough.
All right. See, I feel like Emily keeps getting all the short ones, so I'm going to skip me. I'm going to give you a long one because yours are actually good, and I think you deserve a longer reading. So, Emily, why don't you give us this one?
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. Mine aren't very good at all.
Lies.
Okay.
If it's more than 5 words, Bryan starts to sweat.
This is 2 whole sentences. Okay.
I have faith in you, Emily.
You have lived in this flesh construct long enough. Now it is time for you to come back to me.
Like if they did like an audio book, it's like just make Emily do the tall man voice. Right?
Yeah, it's like the
it's the
Andy Kaufman bit where he's like listening to all of the Mighty Mouse theme song, and the only thing he sings is like "Here He Comes to Save the Day." Like, Emily is there for the entire reading, but she's only got like a total of like 27 words, but she's there because she will nail all of those 27 words.
It's called dedication.
And
it's like you're Damone in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It's like you got the charisma of Cheap Trick.
And I'm counting that as our speculation because we need to move along with this damn thing. All right, next up. I have plans for you later.
BRB.
What?
LOL. Your later came across as a little impersonal, like
later.
I'm going to get some Tostinos. BRB.
Well, I think that's a pretty good interpretation of what's going on. Let's move on.
All right. Moving right along.
Who wants what I think is the longest one?
Oh.
Do it, Scott. Do it, Scott.
Okay. Let me release you from this imperfect flesh that ties you to time and space.
I want to suck your
All
blood.
that is unknown will be known to you once more.
Bravo.
Wow, you actually stepped on my line.
And here I'm pretty sure he's just started his second career as a Peloton instructor.
Was it that Dracula-ish? I thought I was nailing it.
It was definitely a little blah towards the end of that first sentence there.
Well, because when I said
nailing it at the beginning and then Dracula showed up.
Because if you go back and watch it, and I just watched it this afternoon, when he says this imperfect flesh, that's how he says it.
Well, that may be the case, but in the case of your reading it almost looked like you saw a picture of Bela Lugosi while you were reading it, and you just kind of unconsciously slipped into it.
Whatever, man.
And I'll finish this.
It's my audio book. If I want to make him from Romania, I'll make him from Romania.
And I'll cap us off with, it's never over. And I think he's talking about this fucking bit because it's gone on forever at this point.
Would you like some gray poupon?
You know that the next time you guys do this, it's going to be twice as long because he gets so much more
Oh
dialogue.
yeah, he's a chatty Cathy in 4. Oh man, we got to carve out a solid half hour for this. Or maybe we'll do an abridged version because wow.
That was delightful.
I'm just picturing everybody going okay, 1.5 speed. We've hit Morningside Musings. But we are in the home stretch. That brings us to our last segment, which is to offer the Scrim Award. And that is the award that each of us will give for our favorite aspect of Phantasm 3. Emily, as our guest, please go ahead and be the first to give the Scrim Award.
I will give the Scrim Award to the big family reunion, the bringing back of A. Michael Baldwin and Bill Thornbury to join the cast and their characters to rejoin each other as well. That always makes me super happy, even though we don't fully understand how or why Jody is there. It's really cool to see that character come back and rejoin his friends.
And this definitely won't be the last time that we're going oh, great, Jody's back. I have no idea why he's here or why it's in this context, but I'm glad to see him again. Scott, how about you?
I would have to say, you know what? Probably the good old rock roll. And I say that because that stunt represents, I think, what is great about this movie. It's Don Coscarelli recreating something that gave us joy in the 70s for the 90s and really not giving a shit if you don't like it or not. It's made for a very specific group of people, and if you happen to join that train, great. If not, we're still going to be doing 30-foot rolls off of rocks.
And I, of course, simple answer for this, Rocky. She gets the Scrim Award. Gloria Lynn Henry is the MVP for me for this movie. She is absolutely amazing, and she will forever have a rather large space in my heart. And so that brings us to the end of this installment. Emily, thank you so much for joining us today. Like we said, bar none, the best tall man readings that we've had since we started this thing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This was a blast. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And where can we find you? Either anything you want to highlight writing-wise, social media, any of that good stuff?
You can find me on Twitter at HorrorRellaBlog. And then I'm probably going to have some Fantasia Fest reviews hitting the Dead Ringers site within the next couple of weeks.
Ooh.
Awesome. Very nice.
Lovely.
So look out for that, folks. And yeah, look out for next month. We'll be getting into the back half of the series where we'll be covering Phantasm IV, Oblivion. I think that one should make for a pretty interesting convo. And yeah, we want to thank Bryan, our engineer, for helping us out each and every episode. As always, we want to thank you, our listeners, especially those of you who have signed up for a Corpse Club membership. Make sure to visit corpseclub.com to check out our latest episode. You can also sign up to become a member. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Every rating and review helps us out. You can also find us on Google Play, SoundCloud, and all of your favorite podcast providers. If you ever want to get in touch, you can reach us anytime at contact@corpseclub.com or on Twitter at Daily Dead News or at Corpse Club, and on Instagram and Facebook under Corpse Club. Thank you again for listening, and until next time, stay scary.